How can you have fantastic, meaningful conversations that flow naturally in English? The key to that is effective, easy-to-use conversation starters that allow you to have conversations with anyone. I'm Anne-Marie with Speak Confident English. This is exactly where you want to be every week to get the confidence you want for your life and work in English. In today's Confident English lesson, I want to share my 10 favorite conversation starters with you so that you have several questions that you can use anytime you want to have a conversation with anyone, whether you're chatting with colleagues online before a meeting or meeting someone face-to-face. With each question today, I'll tell you exactly why it's an effective conversation starter, and I'll tell you exactly how you can use it. Plus, at the end, I'm going to share 2 bonus questions with you, one of which my students think is so strange when English speakers ask this question, but it really is a great way to get the conversation going. The first few conversation starters on today's list are perfect for getting to know someone for the first time or chatting with someone you haven't seen for a long time. And the first one might sound familiar to you if you've ever done a job interview in English. The first one is tell me about yourself. I love this conversation starter for several reasons. Number 1, it's an easy one to remember. Number 2, again, you can use it with someone you're meeting for the very first time or someone you haven't seen for a while. And number 3, it allows the person you're speaking to decide what he or she wants to share. Whether it's talking about their job and a project happening at work, maybe their personal and family life, or what they enjoy doing on the weekends. You are giving them control over what to share. Now, as I mentioned, this might sound familiar because tell me about yourself is also a common job interview opener. But the way that we answer those in a personal conversation versus a job interview are not quite the same. If you want to learn more about how to answer that question for job interviews, I have a whole other lesson for you, and I'll leave a link to that below. So how can you use this one as a conversation starter? If you've just met someone for the first time and you've finished your introductions, immediately after finding out who a person is, you might say, "So I'm curious, tell me about you," or "Tell me about yourself." Similarly, if you haven't seen a friend, a coworker, or an acquaintance for a long time, you could also say, "It's so good to see you. Tell me about yourself." In other words, you're wanting to get an update, but you're giving them the opportunity to decide what to share with you. Question number 2 is quite similar, but it's really only used in casual conversations when you've just met someone for the first time. And this one is, "So what's your story?" Just like using tell me about yourself, this one is 100% open-ended, and again, you're giving the other person control over what to share. The key to making this question work is listening carefully to the answer and be ready to ask effective follow-up questions. I've got a great example that you can use coming up in this list in just a moment. Now, before I move on to question 3, just as a reminder, this particular question, "So what's your story?" is perfect at the end of an introduction in casual conversations. Conversation starter number 3 is, have you been working on anything interesting or exciting lately? If you've studied with me in any of my courses, you know that a common small talk question that English speakers use, particularly Americans, is, what do you do? People want to know about your profession. But that question is used so often that it has become a little boring. So this is a great alternative. Are you working on anything exciting or interesting? Instead of just asking about someone's profession, you get to focus on something positive happening in their professional life. Conversation number 4 is, what are your plans for the weekend? This one might seem obvious, but that's one of the reasons I love it. It's an easy question to ask and get a conversation going. It's perfect no matter who you're speaking to, and because it focuses on the weekend, that time when we're usually not working, you'll get to know someone's interests, their hobbies, and how they spend their free time. Of course, with that question, what are your plans for the weekend? I'm asking about the future or next weekend. If it's Monday and I want to ask about the weekend that just finished, how would I change that question? How could I alter it to make it past focused? We have two options. How was your weekend, or what did you do this past weekend? Conversation starters 5 and 6 on the list today are questions I love to ask coworkers, acquaintances, and friends, particularly when I want to talk about something other than work, and I want to find out what they're doing in their free time, and I want to go beyond what they do on the weekend. The first one is, what was the highlight of your day, week, or weekend? The reason it's so effective is it immediately puts the focus on something positive, interesting, or even unusual that may have happened that particular day, week, or weekend. And the truth is, you never know how someone is going to answer that question. There's no common answer, so it's always a surprise and interesting. It's definitely a great one to use when you're having lunch with coworkers or just getting coffee with a friend. Number 6 is quite similar. What's the most interesting thing you've done recently? Just like with our previous question, the answers to this are endless. Now that might seem scary because you don't know what's coming. You don't know what someone might share with you. But the good news is all you need to do is sit, listen carefully, and be ready to ask a great follow-up question. My favorite way to do that is question number 7. Tell me more about. That's really interesting. Tell me more about your trip. That sounds really cool. Tell me more about the classes you're taking. That sounds like an amazing adventure. Tell me more about it. Those 4 simple words, tell me more about, are a fantastic way to keep conversations going and flowing naturally. Question number 8 is, where are you from originally? This is a question I ask almost everyone I meet, even people in the city where I live, because truthfully, most of the people here are from somewhere else. I love finding out where people are from because then I can find out more about that particular city, that part of the country, or that part of the world. This is a question that easily leads into a conversation about their city, their local culture or traditions or customs, their cuisine, and much more. Not only is it a great conversation starter when you're getting to know a new colleague or meeting someone at a conference or networking function, but it's also great when you're traveling as well. If you love traveling, like I do, another great question to get a conversation going on that topic is, what is the most interesting place you've ever been to? Or what's the coolest place you've been to? Nearly everyone loves to talk about travel, going on vacation, and sharing recommendations of things that they enjoyed. This is a great conversation starter to share stories and memories and get some fantastic recommendations. I particularly love this conversation starter when I'm traveling and getting to know others in that location. And now, question number 10 on our list for fantastic conversation starters that you can use with anyone is, how did you get into? For example, how did you get into your profession? Or how did you get into that industry? If someone works for a company where everyone wants to work, how did you get into that company? Or if you know that someone has a fascinating or interesting hobby, you could ask them how they got into it. How did you get into sculpting? How did you get into snowboarding? This question is perfect when you're getting to know someone after an initial introduction, once you've learned a little bit about their profession or that particular hobby they're interested in. And with that, you have 10 fantastic conversation starters that you can use with anyone. And as I promised, I also have 2 bonus questions for you. One is a question that my students actually think is a bit unusual when English speakers ask it. And the second one is my all-time favorite conversation starter when I'm chatting with friends or acquaintances. Let's start with the first one that my students think is a bit strange. Have you ever heard an English speaker say, "That's a great sweater, where'd you get it?" "I love your shoes, where'd you buy them?" "Cool glasses, where'd you get them?" Over the years, I've had many students tell me how strange it is that someone wants to find out where to buy the same sweater or pair of shoes. But truthfully, most of the time, that isn't really why they're asking the question. Instead, what they're doing is complimenting something that you're wearing and trying to start a conversation about it. I certainly can't speak for English speakers all over the world, but I can tell you this is a very common thing that Americans do. We love to compliment something that we see and we want to start a conversation about it. And now, bonus question number 2, my all-time favorite conversation starter. Now, truthfully, this question is more personal, so it's probably not appropriate when you're just getting to know someone for the very first time. But it is a great question when you're chatting with friends or a coworker that you know really well. And the question is, what do you wish you had more of in your life? As I'm sure you can immediately notice with that question, it definitely leads to a meaningful, thoughtful conversation. Now that you have a total of 12 conversation starters that you can use with anyone, I have 2 questions for you. What are your favorites from today's list? Are there 2 or 3 questions that you've never thought about asking in English before? What are they, and why do you like them? You can share your favorites with me in the comments below. And question number 2, do you have a different question that I didn't share today that you love to ask when you're having conversations in English? If you do, definitely share it below. It's a great way to share with others in our community, and you might have a conversation starter that will be perfect for someone else to ask. With that, thank you so much for joining me. If you found today's lesson helpful to you, I would love to know. As always, you can tell me by giving this a thumbs up on YouTube, sharing your answers to my questions in the comments below, and sharing this lesson with friends or coworkers on Facebook or LinkedIn. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you next time for your Confident English lesson.